A big thank you to Dean James and Kumar for your introductory comments. Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to welcome you all to the 2021 Women in Data Science Conference at Penn. This year's theme is, This is what a data scientist looks like. My name is Mary Purk, and I'm the Executive Director for Wharton Customer Analytics and AI for Business Centers at Wharton. And I am proud to be with the two co-chairs with me. They're Penn professors Susan Davidson, that Dean Kumar just mentioned from Penn Engineering, and Linda Zhao from Wharton Statistics Department. All proceeds from this year's conference will be donated to the Wharton Global Youth Program Data Science Academy for high school students currently enrolled in grades 10 to 11 with strong backgrounds in math and an interest in data analytics. More information about this program can be found on our event website. We are so excited to be part of the Global Women in Data Science Network, which originated at Stanford University and has grown to include more than 150 organizations worldwide. Last year, we hosted our inaugural WiDS at Penn conference on campus. With more than 120 attendees and 30,000 social media impressions, it was clear to us that students, academics, and professionals are not only interested in hearing from women in the field, but are also eager to amplify their voices. I'm excited to announce that this year we'll be hosting our first virtual conference, and we have more than 400 plus registrants today. What do you think? Can we also set a social media record? Join me this week in sharing your excitement and experience with your network using the WiDS hashtag. WiDS 2021 hashtag. We've also created a social media picture frame that you can use on your profile. You can find more information about this in your daily welcome emails. Thank you for joining us this week. I look forward to seeing you every day from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Blue Jeans virtual platform. Now, before I introduce our amazing keynote speaker that I know you're waiting to hear from, Kate Johnson, I have a few housekeeping items. Any questions you have for our speaker should be submitted through the event chat function. You can adjust your screen layout using the slider tool below my video, right below there. Today's presentation will be available once you complete a short survey at the end of this session, and video recordings will also be available in the viewing room on gather.town later this week. Speaking of which, if you have not yet had the opportunity, I highly encourage you to check out gather.town. In this space, there are opportunities for networking and sponsor engagement from our companies like AWS, AWIP, West Monroe, and Off Their Plate, which is a nonprofit that is helping restaurants deliver meals to those in need. All access information has been sent to you this morning in your daily WiDS welcome email. If you have any questions about access, please reach out to Maddie Lasser. Her email is listed in your welcome email. Networking will take place in gather.town for 30 minutes after this live session. We look forward to seeing you there. As I mentioned before, I'm Mary Purk, the Executive Director at Wharton Customer Analytics at Penn, also AI for Business. At Wharton Customer Analytics is affectionately known as WCA, and WCA lives at the intersection of academics and industry. Through research and experiential learning engagements, we work with companies to transform business challenges and engage top-tier students to deliver business value. We demystify machine learning and AI application technology for both students and our corporate partners to translate research findings into actionable insights. Throughout the academic year, we host analytics accelerators and datathons where students have access to real-world data to solve problems alongside our corporate partners. Anyone is interested in learning more about WCA partnerships and our programs, please contact Rachel Dutcher or myself throughout the duration of the conference. We will be in the gather.town platform. You can visit our sponsorship table in gather.town. And now I am delighted beyond belief to introduce Kate Johnson, president of Microsoft US, a $45 billion subsidiary, which includes all of Microsoft's solutions, services, and support revenues, and supports revenues across the public and private sector in the US. I just have to brag about Kate. She leads a 10,000-person field team to pursue Microsoft's mission to empower every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more. This team focuses on driving transformation within Microsoft's largest commercial organization. Kate is a business technology industry veteran of more than 20 years. She's previously been the chief commercial officer of GE Digital. And prior to GE, she held senior roles focused on transforming familiar businesses at Oracle, Red Hat, and UBS Investment Bank. Kate is a leader both internally and externally on diversity and inclusion initiatives. She was recently appointed as a delegate to Microsoft's CEO Inclusion Council, where she's part of a select group of senior leaders focused on driving Microsoft's internal and external diversity and inclusivity agenda. Kate has an MBA from the Wharton School and a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Lehigh University. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker for today, Kate Johnson. So Kate, can you anchor us in your career journey as a start to our conversation?
Yeah, for sure. First, Mary, I want to thank you and both Dean James and Dean Kumar for including me in this awesome event. It's important, and I'm honored just to be a part of the conversation. I think you did more than justice to my career journey, so I won't belabor it. But basically, I started with an education in electrical engineering. I was convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that that's what I wanted to do. And after about 11 seconds in a lab, doing the work that I had studied to prepare myself to do, I realized that maybe that wasn't a good fit for me, both personality-wise as well as capability-wise. I was probably better on the people side, connecting people to technology rather than building the technology itself. So I went into selling it and, really focused on, trying to evolve myself in terms of being able to make that connection of how to help tech companies grow. And lo and behold, I realized I probably needed an MBA to give me the foundations and the fundamentals that I was lacking due to my engineering degree, where I hadn't really focused on anything other than the technical side of life. And I just fell in love with the business side of things. And then I went into consulting, where I got a chance to sort of sample so many different industries, so many different technologies, so many different business problems. It was an incredible opportunity to learn what the opportunities of the world were and how I might play a role in that. But, and then I ended up going from consulting to be a CIO of an investment banking division. And I went from there to the technology side, where I actually sold technology to CIOs. So I played both a buyer and a seller role. In all those journeys, I think the most important thing, there's probably three big takeaways, right? The first thing is that if you notice, my story starts with my thinking I knew what I wanted to do and I didn't. I know so many people who think they know what they want to do and it's spot on and it's a lifelong passion, and those people are really lucky because they can focus. For those of us that don't necessarily know what we want to do, or we think we do and we're wrong, I'm living proof that it's okay, and the pivot becomes a part of the journey. So you never really have to have that perfect picture or roadmap. Although there were some awkward moments when I described to my parents that after 4 years of paying for private school, I wasn't going to do the thing that they had trained me to do. Other than that, it was a blast to actually make that pivot. I think the second thing is I never really immersed in one function or one industry. I kind of went across the top, which gave me this meta layer of learning, which was extremely important to my discovery that the thing I loved the most and the thing I was probably best at was managing and leading change. I love to study it. I love to be a part of it. I love to create it and instigate it, and I love to lead it. And I don't think I ever would have figured that out had I taken the more traditional route of one role or one function in trying to pursue levels. I pursued learning, not necessarily level, and I was lucky enough to get level over time, but it certainly wasn't the center of my pursuit. And then, I think the thing that's probably the most important is that in anything that, you do across your life, you have to believe that you are worthy and you are able and you are the one who can get it done. And I never had that mindset until I read a book called The Growth Mindset. And I think that's the thing that I just want to convey here is that, I have some amazing education experiences and amazing professional experiences, but the most impactful learning experience I've ever had and the most defining element of who I am as a human being, whether it's inside or outside of work, came from my role as being a mom to a child who actually needed some extra help, specifically extra help in the classroom with learning disabilities, etc. And the way I was approaching the problem for my son was to compare him to these sort of like traditional standards of what success looked like in the classroom. And the principal of the school, he was in 4th grade, gave me a book, Carol Dweck's A Mindset, New Psychology for Success, and said, Kate, you have to read this because the way that you're measuring success is all wrong. Well, I read the book and, thankfully it helped me with the problem of figuring out how to navigate the classroom with a child who wasn't necessarily, a perfect fit for the standard way of learning. But I think more importantly, it showed me how I could be a better mom, a better sister, a better friend, a better wife, a better daughter, and a better professional, because it taught me that you can learn anything, you can do anything, as long as you're willing to commit to the process of practicing, of keeping an open mind, of the new way of doing things, and every day you're opening the door for the next experience, rather than approaching life thinking that you know the answers. That was fundamental to how I started thinking about my roles at work. It's certainly fundamental to how I think about my role of leading Microsoft's change in the commercial world to figuring out how to go from selling legacy on-prem products to being the #1 player in cloud. And so I just wanted to make sure that that's how we ground the conversation, is that I'm a firm believer that it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you've studied, whatever you want to do, the world is there for you as long as you're willing to commit the time and the work. So with that, Mary, I'll turn it over to you for questions.
Well, I thank you so much for sharing that journey and how you've incorporated also your other roles, because I think a lot of times, especially in a conference like this, when we're talking about data science, we think we will have plenty of that throughout the week, but how that success is very much lies in these, learning more about yourself in your everyday life, especially probably one of the most important roles that you have as a mother and navigating that success. I think sometimes we don't talk about that and integrate that. I'm sure that is very important as a leader too,
Sure.
So that you give the opportunity for everyone to talk about different challenges that they have. And so speaking of potentially one of the largest challenges that we're facing and that Dean Kumar eloquently talked about is the role of technology in inclusion and how, especially a company like Microsoft, is approaching that and planning for that. If you can maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So it's a big topic, and we could spend the whole week just on that topic alone. But I mean, just think about the past year and what would life look like if we couldn't have harnessed the power of a remote workforce to continue to push innovation and growth in our economy. We would have been in serious trouble. Fax machines only took us so far, right? So this notion that we could completely disrupt the way we thought about the traditional workplace by lighting up our homes, I'm in my home right now, as our offices, well, it wasn't ideal, and I'm not exactly excited at the reason why we had to do that. Technology has basically enabled us to include the brain power of most of our workforce to keep going. And so I think it's essential. It's table stakes now. And the companies that hadn't invested in the basic infrastructure to do that really had trouble getting back into the game once we were all sheltered in place after the pandemic broke. And frankly, some of them will never be able to catch up. Others that had made that investment then kind of doubled down and decided like, hey, now that we're fully operational, it's day 1 or 2 or 1.5, and what else can we do to innovate to keep ahead? And so we saw years and years and years of digital transformation happening just in months. And so that's pretty cool, starting with how do you include the brain power of the workforce and keep going in such a disruptive event, to, okay, now how do we harness the power of technology to accelerate the pace of innovation? That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think technology is our chance at including everybody. And I talked about my learning experience as a mom, because I think it's important for all of us to recognize that my unique experience at home is what helps me with my unique value proposition at work. And that role as a mom, in addition to all the other roles that I have, is something that shaped the way that I lead teams. Well, guess what? We need people like me in the workforce to make sure that we shape technology in a way that's inclusive for that mindset. We also need technology to consider all of the needs of those that, let's say, don't have all the capabilities. Like, for example, what if you're sight impaired or hearing impaired? For so long, you've been blocked out of participating in the economy in so many different vectors. But now technology is an opportunity to grab you and include you. That's why we have to make sure that we continue to invest in technology accessibility for everybody. It's absolutely incredibly important, and something I feel very passionately about, in case you can't tell, that we've got to focus on, now that we know that technology is that essential component, how do we make it such that it can pull the minds of everybody to get everybody participating in whatever problems we're solving together or whatever innovation we're driving together.
And just to build on that, not only your passion, but also the commitment within Microsoft, can you potentially highlight, maybe 2 or 3 key goals that Microsoft and you as a leader are really focused on to just make, so that we could show that as an example to the audience of what they're likely to see, or what they might be able to either expect in companies, or that they could potentially lead in their organization?
Yeah, sure. I think what you're asking me is, hey, what is your responsibility, Kate, in this story, and what is the responsibility of Microsoft? Because we've been talking about diversity and inclusion for a long time.
Right.
And, the words mean something different to everybody. But the reality is, this past year in 2020, we had an awakening, and it was born out of tragedy. And while I wish we could have avoided every one of those tragedies, I think what happened was when the world was quiet and we were sheltering in place, and George Floyd was murdered, and Breonna Taylor was murdered, and Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, all of a sudden we had nowhere to hide or nowhere to avoid this notion that we have a massive racism problem in the United States of America. It's undeniable. And the beauty of the awakening is that it gives us this moment in time where we can use that awareness to actually make step function change in terms of improvement to drive, equality and equity. And when you think about the responsibility of a company, especially one whose mission is to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more, there couldn't be a more important commitment that we could make to the communities that we serve, which are global. But for me, I think about the United States as my purview. We have to show the possibility and the promise of implementing a diverse and inclusive workplace, and what that could do for the world. And man, we've spent a lot of time thinking through, what does that look like? How do we make it real? And I personally saw it as a major component of my job. And if you think about it, we have 175,000 employees, give or take 10,000 on any given month at Microsoft. That's like a little microcosm of the world. We sell into every single market in the world. And if you're going to do that successfully, you have to look like the markets that you want to sell into. And your technology has to serve all the constituents in the markets that you sell into to really be successful. And so we had to break the problem down. And I guess, yes, I have to sell $45 billion worth of stuff this year. And that consumes me at night, I promise you. But the thing that really keeps me up is, how do I make sure that I've created opportunities for human beings who never thought they had a shot at leading in a company like this? How do we fundamentally change it? And it starts with making sure that we're building the skills that everybody needs. Like my workforce of 10,000 people, you can't just say, okay, now you have to be diverse and inclusive. You have to give them the capabilities to change behavior. So whether that's daring to lead and learning how to rumble and figuring out how to have really difficult conversations, for the first time ever about race and what to do with those conversations, or maybe it's about values training, or maybe it's about how to be an ally, or what covering is and why it's so detrimental to our productivity. But not only do we need to skill up everybody, we also need to make sure that we have the operational components in place to build durable or lasting change. So if I all of a sudden teach somebody how to be an ally, in the performance management system, I want to address that successful transition. And if somebody's not making that transition, I want to address that as well. And then finally, once we get it right inside with skills and operations, we got to bring all of that goodness and that learning to the markets that we serve. So we're working really hard at figuring out how we can take our mission and all the change that we're making inside of Microsoft to the markets that we serve by forming public and private partnerships that actually change the game, making technology accessible and bringing digital skills to underserved populations who never had a shot at this kind of education. So, Mary, I feel incredibly passionate about it. We could talk about this for even more than a week, but I see a responsibility there, and we're stepping up to it, and we're excited about making a difference.
Well, Microsoft is very fortunate to have such an impassioned leader, and literally what you've just said, I took a note down that says Microsoft is walking the talk internally so that they can serve their customers and be leaders in that. I mean, literally, you're walking the talk, and it's cannot happen overnight. But this, how you're skilling everyone up and providing. I liked all these key phrases that you said. How to be an ally. I haven't necessarily heard that as much, but you're incorporating that all into the evaluations and skill training and such, so that you can really push that. Then not push it, but show your customers that that's what you're delivering, and that they too can be doing this.
That's right.
So just to pivot a little bit, but very much related, this was a popular question that's been coming up from the audience, is can you tell us a little bit about the empathy in action plan, and what is this, and why are you introducing it now? I'm assuming it relates to what we were just talking about, I hope.
Yeah, 100%, right? So the empathy in action plan, so it's a super long story, and to give you just the short thumbnail approach to it, by the grace of God, somehow 2 years ago, when I was trying to sort of raise up the leadership across Microsoft US, I recognize learning as a way that we could all bond. Learning, by the way, learning in front of people, you have to be hugely vulnerable. You have to admit that you don't know something to learn, right? And so I loved that as a way to bring my leadership team together. And I said, hey, let's go learn about race. And everybody's like, what? And I said, let's go to Montgomery, Alabama, and visit Brian Stevenson, the author of Just Mercy. That was a book that became a movie with Michael B. Jordan in it, and is now blockbuster. He was somebody that our company had done a lot of work with, and he is probably known as one of the most empathic leaders of all time. He dedicated his entire career to helping the underserved and representing people who are wrongfully imprisoned on death row. And sure enough, we flew out there, 12 of us on the leadership team, and spent 2 days learning about the history of African Americans in the United States. And it was probably one of the most powerful learning experiences that I ever went through. We have 2 African American females on the leadership team. It meant a lot to them that we would spend the time to do this, but probably more importantly, the non-African American or Black members of the leadership team learned a whole lot. And that says something right there. This is not knowledge that you pick up in school. We had to go out of our way to really learn about it. And remember, this is 2 years ago. So this was before the awakening, I like to call it, in 2020. And Brian Stevenson gave me a formula for empathy. I said, you're one of the best empathic leaders I've ever met in my life. If I want to drive empathy at scale in Microsoft US, how do I do it? And he said, Kate, it's a formula. Empathy equals proximity, got to get close to something, plus narrative. You have to be a great storyteller so that you can tell everybody what's going on, plus hope. It has to be hopeful. It can't be negative and surrounded by fear and uncertainty and doubt. If you want a followership for your empathic problem solving, you got to give a sense of hope and encouragement. And then finally, action. And action, even in the face of adversity, especially in the face of adversity. And that just resonated with me because as a change leader, if you can break down something that's really ambiguous and amorphous and hard to define and give me a formula, I'm going to take that thing and I'm going to work with my team and figure out how to operationalize it. And I think the super cool thing is that we focused on that first piece, proximity, to drive empathy, and made a whole heck of a lot of difference in that first year. But as we turned the corner and came into 2020 and experienced what the world experienced, we realized it couldn't be a mantra. We couldn't just be talking about becoming empathic leaders, that we actually had to have a program. And that's where we came up with the 3 things that I talked about, where we got to have skills and have it be intentional. We got to have operations to support lasting change. And we've got to bring this to the marketplace. And it became a program. And it's ended in things like our program called Accelerate, which is this really cool public-private partnership program that we have, where we take a city like Atlanta, for example, and we have Accelerate Atlanta, and we're bringing digital skilling to all of the personas in the community that don't have access to digital skills. And we're working with great companies like Coke and Home Depot, and working to take the people that we train and actually get them jobs. And that's kind of the culmination of the program that I just talked about and the genesis of why empathy became so important to all of us.
Another very popular question that came through, thanks for your response, is how are you able to push the passion towards the mission of creating opportunities to people that never thought they had a chance throughout the organization?
Yeah. So here's the thing that's happening in the market that I see that's actually really, really important. Is that, and it might have to do with what we all lived through over the past year, but there's not a single company on earth that doesn't care about corporate social responsibility. We care about, our carbon footprint with sustainability. We care about taking our assets and making them available to the society at large. So things like skilling. We care about bringing health to everybody. So using technology, for example, to provide remote health support to patients. I've never actually seen a theme throughout my entire career, and Mary was very kind, by the way, when she said I'd been in the industry for 20 years. It's been 30, and I've never seen an opportunity like the one we have today, where unanimously everybody agrees that these corporate social responsibilities are actually not only important for the world, but they're good for business. And so when you take an account executive, for example, that's selling technology into a company, pick any company you want, whether you're selling it to Home Depot, for example, and you say, hey, Microsoft has made a commitment to be carbon, negative by 2030, and we're doing all these things, and it's not just carbon credit trading, it's actually investing in the development of those technologies. If we sell you some technology, do you also want to include a partnership around co-innovation of where we can help Home Depot achieve, some carbon neutrality or maybe carbon negativity, et cetera? And, Home Depot's mind goes, Well, yeah, why wouldn't we want to consider that? If you're talking with Land O'Lakes and they're trying to support farmers across the country, and there's an epidemic of or a pandemic, and they don't have access to local health care, and you can bring that to them through your partnership, that's another great thing. So it's just one of these things where corporate social responsibility has proven time and time again to not only be great for humans, but also great for business. And that's how I always try and anchor the teams into having the same sort of passion that I do around these topics, is to say, hey, we're a Salesforce. Do you want to hit your plan? I got great news. Doing the right thing is going to help you do that. It's a beautiful thing.
A quick question. Let me know if this was asked, but I really wanted to ask this next, which was, you've been focusing also a lot on the topic of courageous leadership. I think, this would be really important to those who are attending. What does courage mean to you? And, what risks, if you equate any courage and risks, did you take, or do you suggest people take early in their career? Because a lot of people would love to be Kate Johnson.
But I always encourage people to want to be themselves in my role, because they'd be a better version every single time. So I think about courage in so many different ways. If you're an individual contributor or part of a larger organization, courage could simply be this notion of speaking truth to power, because that's hard. You're living with consequences of is my manager going to have, is there retribution here because they don't like what I say? Is it going to be uncomfortable? And how do I do that in a constructive and productive way? If you're a leader, courage can also mean that. I mean, I still have to speak truth to Satya and Judson and JP, all of my many bosses. But I think courageous leadership in this day and age really has to do about signing up for taking on the consequences of all of these really hard decisions that you have to make. We have to be intentional about driving diversity. Well, guess what? There's a whole constituency out there that's not really excited to give up privilege. And if you're a leader, you have to think about all of your constituents. And you also have to realize that change for some means change for everybody. And you have to have change plans in place no matter what the perspective is. And you have to have conviction with when you bring something like that to the table. You have to have conviction behind it as a leader, because you're going to have to live with those consequences. So I'm very passionate about courageous leadership, because it means that you're going to take the consequences for what you're doing. And it also means that you're going to pursue doing what's right, no matter how hard it is. And that is not sort of leadership of the past. Leadership of the past was almost like protect the job at any cost, show up to the boardroom knowing the right answer. So you did all this prep and you were like, you had to be right when you went in there. All of those things are changing because the world is too complex for any one person to solve all the problems. So you have to harness the power of a diverse workforce to come up with these answers, and you have to be willing to modify them and be agile enough to change them on the fly, which means you show up saying, I'm going to commit to getting it right as the leader. I'm not going to commit to being right every single time. And that difference is the difference of night and day for an employee who says, oh my God, she's going to listen to what we say, right? And to me, that's what it means. And I learned so much about courageous leadership by working with Brene Brown this year, who helped us roll out Dare to Lead to all of our employees in Microsoft US, and it's made a huge impact for sure.
And because you live that, and then you expect your leadership to live that, employees believe in this, in this courageous leadership and being vulnerable.
Right.
And so, not to say, you want people making the right decisions, but at the same time, you need them to be courageous and speak their mind. And so, how are you? So, is that incorporated into the evaluations and some of the diversity and inclusion and these different metrics you're working throughout the organization? And when can people feel like or it's never going to be fully comfortable, but how can we give people inspiration in their own organizations to look for those signs?
Yeah,
of courageous leadership?
it's a great question. And the way I like to say, how do we know when we're done? What does success look like? You know? So first of all, it's super important to me that you don't think that we have this thing cracked. We don't. I'm super passionate about it. I've got a plan. I'm working really hard. And every day, I skin my knee and I get it back up and I try again. So it's not like, hey, I got the formula, here it is. We have a framework to make progress. That's super important. And when we put the framework together, we recognize that there was an essential skill that was missing. And actually, I'll never forget it. I called Brene Brown in May of last year after all the unspeakable tragedies of violence born out of racism. I said, I need your help. We've been studying race for 18 months now, so I feel like we have permission to dig in more deeply, but we don't know what to do when we have these really difficult conversations. And she said, well, you don't. Of course you don't, because have you taught anybody how to do it? And I said, no. And she said, well, I do have a program that I can help you guys with. I said, I know, I've read your book, Dare to Lead. So, let's go. And after, I'm very persistent, Mary. So after 11 phone calls, I actually got her to agree to personally train us. Okay. She gave us 2 90-minute lectures a week for 8 weeks for my entire extended leadership team. And I did something very different. It was so impactful. About 140 leaders at the top of Microsoft US that kind of sit over all the groups. And I saw such a marked change in how we were behaving together. I said, we got to roll this out to all 10,000. And instead of asking her to roll it out, or instead of rolling it out myself, I said to the extended leadership team, you guys are going to roll it out. And they were like, whoa, can we go through the lectures again? Because we actually went back and designed a curriculum for them to train their managers and for the managers to train their teams. Now, you can't go through all of this and actually be responsible for the outcome of teaching courage skills to your people without actually committing to it a little bit more. And by the way, I can tell in about 6 seconds when somebody's into it and not into it because of their language, how they talk about what they learned through the training, etc. And we address it. When I see somebody's not necessarily committed, I pair them up with somebody who is, so that when they teach this class, they can make up for each other's gaps and actually be better together. But to answer your question, success looks like is our language common? Are we saying the same things? There's this term rumble. When you rumble, you're actually getting together and having constructive discourse. Can you think of anything this country needs more than constructive discourse? Like respecting each other's opinions, even when they're different. And so I'm seeing that happening. I'm seeing when I host a meeting, and no matter what level the person is, they have the courage to actually tell me what's really happening in the field, no matter how yucky it is and how much I really don't want to hear it. I'd rather think everything was perfect. That's what success looks like. And then, of course, there's a very specific metric that we roll out in daily pulse to all of our people, which says, do you think your manager and executive leadership in Microsoft US is committed to driving a diverse and inclusive environment? I measure it every single week. I track it every single week. It has improved about 17 points since we started this. So I think we're on the right track. Again, we don't have all the answers, but we're making progress and we have a framework to keep going and keep learning.
Well, thank you for, we're going to unfortunately need to end on that, but I think that is just such an excellent example of one of these character traits that you brought into the organization. And there was so much adaptability and then empowering the rest of the organization to be part of that journey. So one of the things I am going to do is reach out to you or maybe Tricia on your team and get a list of all the books that you've mentioned so that we can post it for our attendees. And I would just like to say, Kate, it's been too short of time to be with you, but it has been absolutely fantastic. We so appreciate the time that you have given to all of us, and we wish you well, and we hope to see you again. So thank you so very, very much, Kate.
Well, thank you for the time. And if there's one thing I want everybody to take away from the conference is that you can literally do or be anything you want to be as long as you're willing to learn. And learning is hard and takes a lot of energy, but I think you can be anything with it, and so it's worth committing to. So, Mary, thanks for the time. It was great to be here.
Thank you.